Afternoon, everyone. So, did anybody get a chance to look at our websites? That anybody has any suggestions for us, or it looks perfect, or it looks terrible? Okay. Okay, so we'll go on without that. So, okay, so we'll start a little bit and kind of talk a tiny bit about venues today. I wanted to to get a little bit more into kind of the skills and characteristics and such of event planners, and so we'll spend a little more time on that. But talking a little bit about venues today, so we'll so what are some of the venues you think of when you think of events? Like where do you think an event planner would work? Or what are the venues that events are? Where are they?
Definitely like convention and conference centers and stuff like that. And then
Okay.
like my brain automatically goes to like wedding type stuff. So like outdoorsy places, churches kind of. So
Okay. Anyone else have any other places?
I was going to agree with her. I said more wedding. When I think of venue, I think of like a
Mhm.
wedding venue. That's what I mostly think of when it comes to my mind.
Okay.
I kind of thought like concert venues too, like outdoor concert venues, or there's like a place where I'm from in St. Louis. There's like a big, it's kind of one of the girls I'm interviewing for. It's like a beer garden, but for Anheuser-Busch, because Anheuser-Busch is based out of St. Louis. So they do like huge events there. And she kind of works there. So that makes me think
Mhm.
of that too.
Okay. I was in Tampa just recently and went to they have a bunch of breweries in down in St. Pete, and a lot of them have built like little kind of concert venues inside their breweries. So they're constantly doing events because it drives business, it keeps people in the location. So yeah, I think that I see that too. Okay. So I think that those are probably the most common ones you think about when you think about event venues. The funny thing is like there have been recently, I think it's been kind of a trend recently that wedding venues are now kind of specific and stylized. And there's that, kind of that farm feel, the outdoor venues, kind of the indoor outdoor where you can still have, that outdoor feel, but you're covered in case of poor weather, things like that, which I think that's kind of a newer thing because I don't know, before that's the venues that people looked at for weddings specifically were, hotels. And I don't know, just basically any place that was an event venue that was pretty would be in turn used for weddings. There's in Columbus, Ohio, there's the Athenaeum, and they have huge ballrooms and then little tiny spaces. And the building is forever old, but they've done a really good job of kind of keeping that, kind of old look that's really beautiful, a lot of wood. And so they get a ton of weddings in there, in addition to, some of the smaller school proms and things like that. So let's start with hotels. So, hotels actually kind of run the gamut of what they offer. Like, I think they've done that on purpose because it makes them the most marketable. You know what I mean? Like, you can use a hotel for a conference because a lot of them have conference centers in them. A lot of them are attached to convention centers, so you can, part of the event or the convention or the conference will be in the hotel, and part of it would be in the convention center. Um, and so that they have those big spaces, and then they also have the smaller breakout rooms. In addition to that, you get weddings in there, you get conferences, you get smaller meetings, you get trainings, all those sorts of things. So whereas a lot of times when people think about getting a job in a hotel, they may think, housekeeping or the desk management of the actual like operation of the hotel, there's that whole other side of, hotels that do events specifically. It's hard for me to not talk about like the same things because they're just from my frame of reference. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I know a whole lot about what goes on in Ohio. There is a hotel that's actually part of Ohio State University that it is a conference center and a venue and a hotel that kind of serves all those purposes. So they've like specifically made it that it could be used for the widest variety of events. And for that reason and its location on campus, it is packed all the time. Like it is booked up in advance. And I think that's really what they're going for. So then in addition to that side of it, you also have, like you were saying, convention centers. So depending on the city that you're in or the town that you're in, the convention center could be, you know what I mean? It can be something a little bit more intimate to, something that runs 2 city blocks. There, I have not, I know it's amazing. I have not been in the convention center in Nashville. I've heard great things about it. But I was in the convention center in Indianapolis this year, and I'm very familiar with the one in Columbus again because I, am from there, and they're humongous, and they do everything from, really large events to expos to some of those events that we talked about last or on Tuesday, the public like expos where it's like a big garden and home where they'll bring in like RVs and everything indoors for you to see them because they're these humongous rooms, and they also offer things like tournaments. And so they really try to make themselves marketable to a really large variety of events. So they have big spaces and small spaces to meet whatever needs. So, and then specifically with these spaces, I know hotels do that sometimes. I know a lot of times convention centers and conference centers do, where they don't provide every service that an event might need, but they do have preferred vendors, or approved vendors, or some of them have contracted vendors. So there, that's something that like we do here. We have preferred vendors for some things. Sometimes they have to use, like if you want a certain service, you have to use our vendor. We have an on-campus production company. You don't always have to use our on-campus production company, but if you want to fly something in the ballroom and you have to use our production company because we won't let anyone hang anything that isn't an MTSU employee because of the risk associated with it. And convention centers, conference centers, all of them have rules and regulations like that, where they form those relationships with some people that really make their lives easier, because ultimately life is hard enough in events. So if someone makes your life easier, that's who you want to work with. So that's where they'll start with those relationships with preferred vendors and such. And then a lot of those wedding venues and things like that could be considered private clubs, golf clubs, things like that, will offer event opportunities and event locations specifically to members. So having a private club like that at your disposal is something that also can be very beneficial. So some of the places, like as I was going through and preparing, that I probably wouldn't have thought about is event planners on cruise ships, but it's so true. Like I know so many performers that they've spent time, like they spent time at performing at Disney, and then in between their gigs at Disney, they're performing on cruise ships. It's the same sort of thing. So you have a captive audience there, and there are events and happenings and shows every single night. So, I mean, obviously they need people that are talented and skilled in these areas to be able to create experiences for for the guests that are on the cruise ship, because that's why they come there, is to be entertained. So they really need, some great opportunities. Then some of the other things that you guys even suggested, like theaters, amphitheaters, arenas, stadiums, sports facilities, you might not think, you might not always tie together that sports activities are events, but I'm telling you, tournaments, they say they require the same skills, the same planning, the same. It's just a little bit of a different side of the same beast. I have a background in athletics, and I can tell you one of my first jobs in events. Um, there was an ongoing tournament that was a 3-on-3 basketball tournament in the state of Pennsylvania. And there were localities that did these 3-on-3 basketball tournaments. And then the winners from the different areas played at the state level. So it was this graduated thing. My first tournament had 400 teams. It was the most overwhelming thing because I had never done anything in that capacity, and it was had always been done at such a high level, and it requires the same sort of skills. So some of those things can be very specific, but those skill sets, they're really broad and can be utilized across that whole area of event planning. Um, a lot of like the amphitheaters and such, there are other even majors on campus. Like there's a venue management major on campus that a lot of this is overlap. A lot of it's really similar. And then you get places like what we do here at a college where we do kind of everything. So we do conferences, we do concerts, we do all of those sorts of things. So depending on where you are, you could really get experience doing a huge variety of events, or you can get very specific in what you want to do and do something, maybe you only do tournaments. Maybe you work at an athletic, facility and you only do tournaments, or you work at an amphitheater and you do concerts and that's all you do. So, it can be very general, it can be very broad, or it could be very specific to, a certain area. Um, do you guys have any questions about any venues or options or different jobs and such that you could have at those venues that lend itself to an event planning major? I feel like everyone's as tired as I am this morning. Is that true? Yes. Yeah, okay. Well,
I do have one question.
absolutely.
So I've kind of always had the dream to possibly own my own venue,
Mhm.
possibly like a wedding venue or something, because I've always wanted to live on beautiful land. Who wouldn't? And maybe like
Mhm.
rent out my house or something, or rent out, like a part of my house or something. I had gone to a wedding a long time ago, and that's kind of how it worked. Like the lady lived in the house, but there was like a large part of it that was used for events and stuff. So would that be like, I don't want to say, would that, I guess, do you hire event planners to come to your venue and like rent it out, or like how does that really work, like if you were to do that? I mean, I know, I don't
Yeah,
know.
no, I mean, I think there are so many ways to skin a cat. So there's so many different ways that you can do it, and it's kind of, if you own the venue, you'll figure out like what part of that process that you want to do.
Mhm.
So there are a lot of venues, especially wedding venues, that their wedding planners are actually in-house.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like when you come and you book a venue, you're assigned a wedding planner and that wedding planner takes you through everything. There are
Mm.
also, or there's also the venues that are a little bit more kind of you take the lead. Whether you hire your own wedding planner or whether you plan it yourself, that they say like these are the stipulations that we have, make sure you stay within it, and then they're a little bit more hands off. So it kind of depends on that, and it depends on what level of service you want to provide. Like, do you want to be a venue only? Do you want to be a full service venue that offers all of those services? Do you want to have all of your, do you want to have an in-house caterer? Do you want to have now we're probably talking about something a little bit larger, if you're talking about something a little bit smaller, which that those sorts of wedding venues are really popular in the area that you're in right now. In in between, I would say Murfreesboro and Franklin, there are a huge number of those types of venues, and even down into Manchester. And so, I mean, I would encourage you. A bunch of these places, like they're people just like you. And if you have questions about like how have you made that successful, I would reach out. Um, I can't imagine anyone that I've talked to, and I've talked to a lot because when I worked for the city of Franklin, we were trying to figure out a way to make the big barn that we had on one of our parks a wedding venue option, as well as it being a functional working barn. And so it was kind of a little bit different of a challenge because there's also a polo arena, so it has to be functional. So trying to like, what kind of floor could we put in that would be attractive for a wedding, but also would work for horses? Like, so, it was a unique challenge. So we did talk to quite a few different wedding venues, and like what they charged and how they did that. And they were all super open. I think that they would, you know what I mean? Like they would love to talk to you. Even like Arrington they do weddings. But if you look up like individual, and I might be, I swear I might have a list somewhere so I can look for it and even give you like a list of what's out there. But I would say you would have the most success and get the most and best information from somebody who's done that.
Okay. Thank you so much. That's
No
awesome. I
problem.
appreciate that.
So anybody else before I move on? No? Okay. So let's jump into like what it means. So I'm going to do the same sort of thing. Tell me about event professionals. Like from the top of your head, what do you think they are like? And what would you expect that they need to excel at? Like, what do you think they're good at?
Yeah,
Mhm.
like what she just said in the chat, like definitely being organized and like also like being able to be like calm, cool, and collected of like obviously something's going to go wrong, but you have to like pretend, well, you hope not, but anyways, but like you have to like pretend it's fine and be like resourceful. That's what I think kind of.
I think I use all those words, so I agree completely.
I think you definitely have to be a people person. And also knowing, like you said, calm, cool, collected, and like acting like everything's fine, but also knowing when to go to the client or the venue and, saying, we have an issue, let's figure this out. Let's work through this, and being honest, but in a calm, cool, collected way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Caroline, I think that's true. Being able to adjust to changes and respond quickly, handling pressure. I don't think right now, I think everything is a little skewed because COVID, but I think it was like 5 or 10 years ago that it was on the news because one of my friends took a picture of it, and it was the 5 most stressful jobs and event planning was one of them. It was like doctors, event planners, and I think it's just that. I think it can feel stressful if you are rigid, or, if it's tough for you to change gears quickly. So, yes, it can be stressful. But so some of the things, and I'll just play off of what a lot of you said. I agree completely. I think one of the biggest things, and I talk about this with my staff a lot, is flexibility. So it's not just flexibility as far as like scheduling, because I mean, let's be real. If you want to be a wedding planner, but you want to work on Monday to Friday from 8 to 5, you're not going to be very successful because weddings don't happen during the day on Monday through Friday. Sometimes there are some, but overall, you know, that you have to be flexible with your time. There are also like crazy things. If you do outdoor events, you know, you are always at the mercy of the weather. We're supposed to have a movie outside tonight. Do y'all think that's going to happen? We might have a tornado, so it's probably, you know, we've already moved it. So it's important to be flexible, and for staff to be flexible and understand and you know what I mean, that you have to communicate that we are at, you know, this is someone that came. We want to do a movie outdoors. Super. It's going to, you know, it's storming right now. So what would you like to do? Would you like to move it indoors, or would you like to maintain the authenticity of what you were trying to accomplish and move it to a different date? So it's also being able to discuss that need to be flexible and manage expectations with the client as well. You know, just to keep, so everybody understands the reality of the situation. But it's also to be important. It's also important to understand that you have to be flexible regarding the job. I could give you a list right now of the job description for our event staff, for our managers, for our internships, for our, you know, for everything that we do. But when it comes down to it, their job is to do whatever needs to be done. Like I said, like I talked about on Tuesday, you know, we've kind of split our teams, and we have a setup team and we have an event team. If they walk in and someone ran it, we had this happen. The group that was in the room ran into the pipe and drape because there was a need to kind of wrap the pipe and drape around, so it was kind of curved. And so it was away from the wall. It's 20-foot pipe and drape. We had it weighted, but they ran right into the pole and knocked it down. So in that moment, you know, first and foremost, as soon as you find out, you know, everyone's okay and no one got knocked out, like is to, you know, right that situation. So the job is whatever it is. And so that need to be flexible is really important. And in reality, some people really struggle with that. Like that is just not something that some people can do, that they, you know, that they'll find out. Uh, I have to be real honest. Sometimes even with our staff, you know, students, part-time jobs, inevitably everyone, you know, usually understands there's some flexibility required there. A lot of the jobs you guys get when you're in college, the job I had when I was in college, you know, they're open, you know, from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. So there's some need to be flexible. But some people don't do very well with that. They don't do very well with, this morning I had to let my staff know that there's no movie tonight. Do you want to work a movie tomorrow night? Okay. So another thing I would say is a majority of the event planners I know and people that work in the events industry are very passionate. Like you said, event planning can be stressful. So you kind of have to love it. Like there has to be some part of it that you know gets you excited. Like, is it the creativity? Is it the variety? Is it the challenge? Is it the working with people? But there has to be some part of it that you really enjoy, because there are going to be some parts of it that you don't. But I think that's really true with every job. So I would say, in addition to that, so I saw on the, I have the PowerPoint, and and I saw a bunch of things. I was doing a little bit of research, and everyone says multitasking. So everyone that knows me will tell you I have no ability to multitask. Like I cannot do two things at once. I cannot write while you talk to me. I can do nothing. You will talk to me while I'm doing something else, and then I will look at you and I'll be like, what? Like I got none of it. So what my take on what that is you will constantly be interrupted. It is a job that you have to be able to switch gears really quickly. You have to understand that you're going to be interrupted, and that once that interruption is over, you have to be able to jump back on task quickly. So that's my take on multitasking, because for me at least, multitasking is a myth. So you also have to have the ability to prioritize your tasks. So there's never going to be a point that now that is not true. That is not true. There are some positions and some jobs. I know the director of the St. Louis Art Fair. The St. Louis Art Fair is the only thing they do. Like, it is an organization that is their only responsibility, is to put on that event once a year. So that is the only thing they're working on. Now, within that event, there are a ton of different things that are required to do. So it's not like can have a one-track mind, but you have to be able to figure out what is the most pressing issue right this minute, and then but without putting off all those other things that need to be done in a timely manner. So it's really figuring that part out. Some of that comes with, we'll talk about operating procedures and scheduling and a calendar for events and things like that. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but all of those things help, as well as just experience. The more familiar you are, you don't need as many lists and things as to remind you of every little detail, but it's still good to have, because I'm sure you guys, I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but the way we operate, we operate on the if you get hit by a bus mentality. It's funny because I was talking to someone in the theater and they said the exact same thing. So for things to be ready to go and so organized that if you were hit by a bus, that someone else could pick it up and run with it without anyone knowing that anything happened. So the next thing I would say about event professionals is, it's not just even they like to problem solve, it's creative problem solving, because facing challenges and critical thinking, both in the planning of an event and in the moment, because there are things that you are never going to anticipate. Let me give you an example. Last night, we had a signature event in our ballroom with 3 different academic classes participating, with a video wall and the video truck. And we had the video truck parked downstairs, and Aramark was smoking meat for today's menu, and the entire video truck filled with smoke. Okay, how do you anticipate that? Like, however would you anticipate that? Like, now it's one of those things that we know about, and moving forward, we'll either move the truck or we'll make sure that they're not smoking. But it's never one of those things that's been on our radar. We've had the video truck here a ton of times before, and that's never happened. So it's kind of those, what do you do? So being able to problem solve in that moment. Someone said being resourceful. I think that's super important, because you have to solve the problem in the moment. So you have to use whatever is available to you, to do the best you can. You need to have learned how to decipher, and someone else talked about this too. What is a problem that I can solve, and when do I need to communicate that there is a problem? I mean, what we always, hope to do is that when the world is crashing around us, the client knows nothing is wrong. Like, they have no idea. And then we've done our job, because inevitably we all work with technology. So inevitably things will always go wrong, because technology is fantastic when it works, and a nightmare when it doesn't. But if we, like, whatever we can do for them not to understand that there is really a problem or how serious it is, there are definitely times where you have to come to them and say, okay, so this is what's happening. But one thing I've learned is you need to have already come up with a solution when you do that, because it makes it less stressful for them. Okay, so we can't do this exactly how we discussed initially, but this is what we can do instead. And if you have a solution for them, it becomes way less stressful for them in the moment. And understanding that we are event planners and we do this all the time. And so even though these things can be stressful for us, it is nothing compared to the stress these people feel because they are not necessarily event planners. So if you come to a bride and say, I don't know, something catastrophic has happened, they're going to get pretty upset because they've been imagining and planning this day for a long time. So having a solution, something that, and if you come to them and say, like, I know that this is different than we talked about, but here's a solution. Usually you can really head off any, really upset clients in that process. Um, it's also good to, and this comes with experience, I think, is anticipating possible issues. So you have a solution prepared in case, like you have a backup and you have a backup for your backup. And then there are always, like I said, things that you can't anticipate, but whatever you can, you have a plan for it. I would say building relationships and communication. I think you want to work with people. That's why you're here. I mean, this whole industry, I would imagine everybody that's in this class, they want to work with people. And so those building relationships with coworkers and vendors and collaborators and clients, it's important not just for the success of that specific event, but also your success as a professional. So the biggest compliment is if you have we're kind of spoiled here because we have a lot of repeat clients because we deal with all the student groups and all of the campus departments, and we're way cheaper for them than for them to go off campus. So it's, like I said, we're a little spoiled, but we still try to have that same mentality that word of mouth recommendations are the best marketing for your services or your venue. So if you make that person happy, if you make that experience positive, that doesn't mean that everything has to go right. That just means that you make that experience positive for them. They're going to talk about it and they're going to come back. Um, so also, I think it's also important to be detail oriented and while still seeing the big picture. So you need to be able to walk in a room that's set up for an event and look at it and see how do you feel when you walk into the room? If you notice that something looks off, is not centered, who, you know what I mean, whatever it is you notice, inevitably either the client or someone or a patron or a visitor of that event is going to see that as well, and it can impact their experience. So with my staff specifically, I try to really let them take the lead. But a majority of the time, especially the big stuff, like I walk in and I say, this is what I see, because I want them to see that. You know what I mean? Like the goal is for them to see and notice all the things I notice. Um, seeing the whole, like seeing those little details as well as seeing the whole big picture. And gives you the like it gives you that overall impact and making sure that you're meeting the objectives of the event while not dropping any of the little details that can negatively impact the experience. So ultimately, all of these events, you're trying to create an experience for the people who are in attendance. That's really the way that the event industry has moved, that it's more than just I'm going here for this. They want a lot of people that are putting on events, they want the people that come to have a very specific feeling or experience when they are there. And that is something that, as an event planner, that's what you can do, is really try to pull out what they want from that experience, and then you can help them create it. Okay. And then you talked about being organized. So one thing I would say for sure is you don't have to have all of these things in you right now. There are a lot of these things that are learned. That I was very much a big picture person. And I had to become detail oriented to be successful. Like it's necessary. So then I created kind of my own processes about how, like a step by step, what I needed to do. So I made sure that I didn't forget anything. I am the person that if it is not written down, it is never going to happen, because I don't remember those sorts of things. So So it's like having your own self-awareness of what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then figuring out how to overcome those things, or how, to create a process that makes that your strength. So now the people that I work with, they think I'm super detail oriented. It's because I work at it, you know? So specifically with events, depending on even little events, it isn't necessarily, we talk about this all the time on campus. It is not about whether an event is big or small. It's the complexity of an event and how many moving parts there are of an event, because there are some events that we have that are not big at all, but are very complex because of all of the different moving parts. So having a specific process, we're working to, since our whole goal is to develop staff and to have our student staff be leading the charge on all of these events and developing all of these skills, and working with the clients and such, we've been working on and developing standard operating procedures so there's consistency, but it reduces their stress because it's really a guide to follow. I mean, all a standard operating procedure is, you do this and then this and then this and then this. And obviously there are some things for some events that will apply and not apply to others, but that gives them, a really good path to follow. So I would encourage you, like, even through your education, I think you'll get the opportunity to kind of develop some of those processes, and they're really going to benefit you, especially when you step out into the professional world. They'll really give you that place to start, because your internship, your practical, whatever you're doing, they're going to want you to be proactive. They want to see what you are going to do, not how well you do what they tell you. You know what I'm saying? Do you get the difference there? I mean, I know that's what I'm always looking for. The students that work for me as event staff, the ones that I never have to look at them and tell them something, that they're already doing it before I tell them, it is real quick that those are the ones that I'm like, so have you thought about, taking on any more responsibility? It comes with a raise. So, okay. So does that does that all sound, is there anything in there that you think I left out, or anything that's different than what you thought of before? No? Okay. So as far as skill building, so this is so characteristics and skills, I mean, sometimes they can be interchangeable. Sometimes it's a little more like, this is something that you need to make a point to learn about. So financial budgeting, not only budgeting for you, but also understanding how to work within the budget of a client. So some people will come to you and say, like, this is what I want. Okay. And so they don't think about the budget first. But a lot of decisions have to be made in accordance to the budget. I work with student groups all the time. They will come to me and want the biggest and best. Like they want Disney World on, like, I don't know, on like, what is the water park in Nashville? Nashville Shores? Is that what it's called? On a Nashville Shores budget. Like, that's what they like, seriously, that the discrepancy of what they're hoping for, which versus what they actually have the money for, it sometimes is tough to manage. But that's where some of that creative problem solving comes in, because I don't know. I mean, I worked for a city and I worked for Parks and Rec. You would not believe, like, I made a chandelier out of a hula hoop. So you would not believe the things that you can do. And now you have Pinterest. So, I mean, come on, like, you have the tools that you can really make some amazing things if you have the time to do it. But time is also money. So time is also expensive. So you have to take that into consideration too. But if you're talking about, like Audrey specifically, if you're talking about owning your own venue, you're going to need to create a pricing structure that is manageable for you to still make a profit, responsible for the services you're providing. So it's ethical, that you, and then it's also, in line with what's in the market so that people want to come to you. So you really have to look at all of those things and like, what is something that, what are the things I'm going to include because I can, and what are the things that are going to be an extra cost? So it's really, you really have to really get a good understanding of what those things are and have an idea about how to do all of that. So it's not just the client and their budget, it's also determining how much are your services going to cost so that you can put food on your own table. Yeah. Um, then management skills. So I don't love management. I talk a lot more about leadership. Those are really two different things, at least in my view. And what I teach my staff and what I try to live is I lead by example. So I'm never going to ask my staff to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. And a majority of the time, I can't always, the hardest thing for me sometimes is to give them a task and walk away, because what I want to do is do it with them, because then they don't feel like I'm giving them like all the things I don't want to do. Um, but those things are important. You have to, but it's not just the management of staff, it's also managing space. You need to have a process. If you have multiple rooms, multiple facilities, how are you reserving those? Are there multiple people that are reserving spaces? How are you going to make sure that I don't reserve the same space that Audrey reserves, and then we have a conflict? So you have to have those processes there. Management of time and schedules of your staff, of yourself, of your space, management of people and customers. Like if you're looking at a concert venue, you need to understand crowd management. You need to understand like what do you do if everyone runs to the stage? Like you need to have an idea on how you're going to manage those things. Line management, it is a real thing. It is an important thing. You need to have a plan for that. Don't just think everyone's going to neatly and organized walk into a venue. Like, I mean, in a perfect world, that would be the case. But if your seating is not assigned and you have like a specific time that gates open and everybody can come in at the same time, you might have a pretty decent rush because everybody's trying to get the best seat. So, thinking about those things ahead of time. So, and then management of resources. What if you have meetings and you have a conference and they need AV in every single room and you don't have AV in every single room? Or what if you reserve the wrong rooms that need AV? So it's managing all of those things. So it's having a clear understanding of everything you have and how to best utilize those resources. Okay. So you'll also, I think, regardless of what type of event planning or where you work, you'll probably be working with contracts. So having some familiarity about how that process works, having a draft of a contract, getting some input from like all of our contracts, like go through our contracts office. That's what they do. If I didn't have that resource, like what would my resource be? I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I'd need to find someone that's going to make sure that we're covered under that contract, that the language is right. Inability to in addition to that is also liability. So if you are, which to me goes along with risk management. So if you're doing something, I told you before, I worked in Parks and Rec, where the city I worked for in Ohio, we had a great rapport, and in our meetings, like our big meetings each week, we're talking about all the different things. And then I don't know, for some reason, I made it my goal every week to come up with some crazy idea to get my director to allow me to do. And a lot of time, like sometimes he let me do it. Sometimes he was like, oh my goodness, that is way too risky. Now, I never brought something that other people had not done before. I don't believe I have a lot of original ideas. I just borrow them from other people. So nothing is so out of bounds that no one else has done it safely. But I do tell you that I did get on him a little bit because there was one thing I wanted to do, like a big giant water slide down a hill that we had, and he wouldn't let me do it. And seriously, the year after I left, they did it. I was like, come on. But you'll have that. But so as far as risk management, there like there's liability there. There are ways that that you can make sure that you're not going to be held liable if someone chooses to do an activity, because when it comes to events, um, there it's a trade-off. Nothing is ever completely and totally perfectly safe. So that's what risk management is. It's like you're discussing the safety and the patrons and the staff, and they aren't always the most fun decisions, but they have to be made. And there are times that safety and convenience and the experience have to be weighed against each other. So fun things aren't always completely safe. And where is the balance, and where is that line, and what is too far? Like, where is it no longer that's something that we could do because I feel like the risks are too high and the liability would be too high. So those sorts of things, I mean, it's amazing. I heard the risk manager that did the Olympics in Georgia talk about risk management, and it was just at this scale that I had never imagined. And it like the level at which he thought of risk management, because so much of that, I mean, all of those sports and everything, there's a huge risk, and you never know what the audience is going to do. And with so many people from so many different places, there's so much potential for issues or not issues, and you have to be prepared for all of those things, but hopefully not expect them. um, in addition, it's important to have some skills in sales and marketing. I would love to say that where you work, that they're going to be able to employ a sales and marketing team. In reality, this is the only place I have worked that marketing has not been a part of my event planning. So, um, and I still do a little, but just not at the same scale. Um, I mean, I was like the social media marketing and the online website planner, and it really just depends on where you are, especially if you're planning to, own your own business. Those skills are important because that is your, I mean, like that's your livelihood. So you have to be able to market your services at the same time you're providing services, so that as soon as you're done with the one you're planning, you've got another one waiting, or 5 more, or whatever. Um, so then it's technology. Um, can you see, to me, I am not a super tech savvy person, but I can learn. A perfect example, which you will all learn. You'll all learn Teams, because Zoom will go away. I don't know if you all know that Skype for Business is leaving, Zoom is going away. There's no like set timeline, but the whole campus is going to move over to Teams. So I've jumped totally on board, because I figure I might as well do it now than wait till I'm forced to. So at least I have some time to learn it. But those sorts of things, every place I've worked has some sort of scheduling software or registration software. So it's important to like understand that that's something that I know you're all are so young and you use technology all the time. But every time you have to learn something new, it's just something new, and you can learn it, but just be willing to jump in there and do that, because it makes business easier in general. Um, Also, I would say learning how to delegate. You cannot do everything. No matter what level that you are at, you cannot do everything. You have to trust others. You have to, and and it's not just being able to trust others. It's also that modeling good leadership, as that it's the only way to develop the people that work for you, is to give them responsibility. That's the only way to make them better at what they do. What are they learning if you spoon feed them? they're not learning anything. So learning how to delegate and still accomplish a fantastic product is the key to the castle. So you can't, like, that's where you find that work-life balance, is that you have to be able to delegate, and but know that you've developed them enough that they can accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. Okay, and then finally, I would say communication and negotiation. There are always limitations to what you can accomplish, or pay people, or can do for what people want to pay. So managing expectations, and getting the most bang for your buck will require the ability to negotiate. So whether you are negotiating with a venue or you are negotiating with a client, all those things are important. Those skills are really, really important, and being able to communicate that effectively in a positive way and in a way that doesn't stress someone out is really beneficial. Sound good? Anybody have any questions or thoughts on the skills? Was that overwhelming or different than what you had thought about?
I kind of never thought about the risk management. I mean, I did, because one time I used to work at a bar that was a pretty busy bar. And I asked my manager, just from like a really busy night, I said, how do you not like worry about all these drunk people? Like, and I feel like that definitely goes hand in hand with like risk, especially in events and stuff, sporting events, concerts, all that stuff, weddings even. And he was like, I barely sleep. Like he said, he was like, I worry about it every single night. Is somebody gonna fall down and crack their head open because they were drunk? Like, and I just, it did kind of scare me, but it was interesting to think about, because sometimes that side of it you don't really think about. You just think about the happiness and the, the fun part of it. But
Mhm.
that was interesting to hear that about the Olympics. I don't know. I never would have thought about it.
Mhm. Well, and I think that's the good part of having a risk management plan, is because then it takes some of the stress out of it, because you're thinking through what are the possible risks and how could we mitigate those risks? Like, how could we prevent bad things from happening? Like, what is the limit? Like, what do you do if you have, like, if you have, I worked at a wedding that I thought was going to be the most chill wedding, because it was like a high up in the police department in the city I worked for. There were more drunk people that were difficult at that wedding than any other wedding I had dealt with before. And I finally, like, it was the father of the bride that was the kind of high up police officer. And I finally looked at him and I was like, so do you want to deal with this? Or would you like me to call the cops? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, because that was the one I didn't anticipate being a struggle. But I mean, it does come to that point. I mean, you try to diffuse, you try to handle it, you try to deal with it, but there is always that point at which we've reached the point that there is not a whole lot I can do. This is a negative situation and you can't put yourself at risk. So that, you always do get to that point, but it's good to know, where is that line? Where is that point? So it isn't as stressful. So you're not thinking about it all the time because you have a plan. Make sense? Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah. So as far as there in your the slides that I know that Dr. Lane sent you, there is a whole lot that talks about like different tasks and things that you can do as part of being an event professional. And I would really say, I mean, it's that and more. It's I tell you, that is what I like about it, is the variety, because I learned so much. Last night here, we had a concert. I told you, the signature event. I learned all about video walls. I learned that, like, all these things that I've not known about before because I haven't done that before. But it was also our students that, got an opportunity to really learn about that so that they know moving forward, like this is something, that's feasible. And now they know that on this campus, that's something that we can do, and we can do it in a way that's not cost prohibitive. So it's learning what's out there, learning what's available, and really, again, it's being proactive because you will inevitably be dealing with an event that does something that you have no idea about. It's difficult for you to provide a service if you don't know. Like, say you're a wedding and they want a specific, religious, like they want to do things a certain way because of their religious beliefs and all of that. Like, it's important to learn about that so you make sure that you are offering them the experience that they are looking for. Whatever kind of event you're working with, or client that you're working with, you want to make sure that you are proactive and go out and develop those skills and learn about what you need to know to be able to provide the best service and experience for them. And taking that initiative, that is what is going to set you apart from someone else, is really going that extra mile and letting them know, like, that's how important it is to you. That's how important their business is to you, is to make sure that you are making them feel how important it is to you by going that extra step to be prepared and to know and to understand what they're trying to do. So
I'm going to jump in really quickly. And sometimes you are actually only going an extra inch and it feels like a mile to the client. And that's really what the difference is that by pre-planning and putting that effort in up front, it really doesn't, I mean, how much research do you think you have to do on, oh, they asked for this specific thing for a religious ceremony I haven't heard of before. I read a couple websites, I get a good idea of what that looks like, and I tell them it feels like a mile to them, but it really wasn't that much for you.
That's a really good point. I mean, sometimes it's a matter of a couple minutes, and they feel like you've done a ton. We've worked with the Band of Blue this semester because they aren't able to have any in-person concerts. They don't have the ability to do a multicam view for a live stream or any recordings. So we have the space and the cameras, and so they've been coming over here to do some recordings. He thinks I'm like the best person in the world because I have done so much research. No, I was just in music for a really long time, and my husband was a music major. Like, I just know all about band. Like, he just thinks, like, he's like, wow, I just can't believe you guys know so much. And I was like, I mean, yep, it's all for you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they feel like you've done so much, and sometimes it's really not that, but they appreciate they are so appreciative of that time that you do take. So it's great. So I really think about, I think we'll just kind of, I'll let you read through those tasks because I think we'll talk a lot about that, a little bit more about that when we come down to process. So if you look through it and you have any questions, just let me know and I'll be happy to come back and talk about it. But the talking through the event planning process. So I think things are a little bit different depending on what your role is. So the research part is a little bit more indicative of you are putting the event on for your organization, I think. I think there's still some research involved, like we were just talking about, like this person wants to do something, like, what is that? I don't even know what that is. I don't even know how to make that happen. I had to learn so much. I'm from the North, and then I moved to the city of Franklin during the sesquicentennial of the Civil War. It was such a crash course in how different like things are perceived and taught and thought about in different places in the country. Like, I did a lot of research, and some of it, like, it was just, I was like, wow, that is just so different than I learned it. So, it's that sort of a thing. So the research I think is important for everything, but I think the process is a little bit different when you're planning an event. So, the cities I worked for, I planned the events for the cities. Sometimes it was, they were repetitive events that happened every year, and I was picking up where the person before me left off, and it was just kind of not the same old, because it's important to reinvent and renew and make things unique and a new experience every time. But the research part of that is a little bit different than when you're starting something brand new. But in general, the research portion of what is the purpose, like what is the objective, like why do you want to do this? What need does this event fill? Does it make sense for me to do a concert if in the summer there's a concert every single week someplace else just down the street? Like, does that make sense? Am I filling a need? Like, does that make sense? Is someone going to want to invest in that time, money, and such? Um, or would it be better to do something else? Identifying a need in the community, something that's lacking, is really part of that research, and then trying to figure out, like, how could I meet that need? Who specifically should hold the event? Like, are you the right person? Like, is your organization the right person? Would it be better to work in tandem with another group? When I worked for the city of Franklin, I don't know, have you heard of Barktoberfest? No? So I'm trying to remember, Nashville Paw, I think it's a magazine, about pets. And they had started an event called Barktoberfest. And it started out, in the first year, it was like 100 people. And then the second year, it was like 2,000. And she was really overwhelmed. And then the third year, she's like, I need a new place. So she and I worked together because I had the space and she had the idea. And so we worked in tandem. And that year was really good because we had 15,000. So the growth was huge, and that was a need. It was a need, obviously, in the community because people here love their pets, and she had a specific need for a larger location that could provide everything. But that was something that we co-sponsored that together. So it was like that private-public partnership that you guys hear about all the time because it's like a buzzword. And then what is the best location that is available to you? So when you work, like when I worked for a city, I had different locations available to me to use for free because we owned locations, but still within that, determining which one would be best, for the different event that I was doing. Also, if you aren't associated with any sort of a facility, doing that research, you know what you want to accomplish, you kind of know how many people or you need to have a good idea of how many people there. That's one of the first things a facility is going to ask you: how many people are you expecting? Because they don't know if they can service you, if they don't know how many people you're expecting. Because if you say 500 and then you end up having 100, that space is going to be empty. It really depends on the nature of the event, on whether you can adapt those things. It's definitely easier to start big and go smaller than it is to start small and get bigger, because a lot of facilities, they have a capacity that's maxed out, and so that can limit what you're trying to do. And then the other research part is, what is the focus and the expected outcome? What are you trying to accomplish? And once you kind of know, once you have those things, I really think, like, then you can get down and then you can get to the fun stuff, which is the design part. Right now, a majority of what we do is as a facility, but we are very involved in the design process, and I would encourage you, if you aren't part of a facility, include them in the design process, because you might be really surprised at the things that they can offer. It might be things you have never thought of. Would you think that if you came here to do an event that I could get you a video wall? Like, would you have any idea? You'd never even expect that. No one here does until we put one up and they're like, oh, wow, I want that. It's amazing. It's 40 feet wide and 20 feet tall. It's humongous. So, you know, designing, brainstorming of new ideas, the more people that you can bring in with experience, you know, that's where you can really bring in all your partners and make everybody feel like they're a part of the event, is in that brainstorming process. If it's a repeat event, what can you do to improve upon it from last time? Don't let it be the same thing over and over. Why would you go to the same thing over and over and over again? You've got to make it fresh. You've got to bring some new component to make it exciting and new and different and fun, for your attendees, and get them to come back year after year. What can you do better than you did last time? And then ultimately, what can create a lasting experience for the attendees? Okay. So, have you guys been involved? Like, have you been involved in the design process for an event? Has anybody? What was it like?
So I worked at the Renaissance Hotel, and I do banquets. Or well, I haven't done it for like a year. I'm still furloughed. But whenever I only worked there 2.5 months, but towards the end they had. It's not more. It's not like super like a design of a whole event, but like they would have us like build these carts that and they would have it like a certain way, like elevations and like different elevations and stuff. And basically, they would leave us to kind of design these carts where we would put like food stations, basically. So like everything had to look a certain way, or but they would give us kind of like the creativity to kind of build these things. And then they
Yeah.
give us like certain like Nashville stuff, like I don't know, like record players and like certain things that you'd have to put on these carts, like just make it more Nashville-y.
That's really cool. I love when I can say to someone, like, here you go, here are all the things, make it look really cool. Like, that's my favorite thing to do, because it frees me up to do something else, and they always come up with something I wouldn't have thought of. So that's pretty cool. I like that. So the next step would be the actual planning process. So you've identified what you're trying to do, where you're doing it, what you're trying to accomplish, what's the focus, who's it for, all of those things. So you've determined your audience, all of that. You've kind of designed how, like, the feel of the event, what you want it to look like, and then it comes down to planning. Um, Planning is really budget driven. It's really important to have a really good idea of what budget you have to work with. Um, I, I haven't encountered very many times where budget was no object. Um, but I have encountered situations where it was much more about the services than it was about the budget, and they were willing to go a little bit higher to get a higher level of service. So they're typically, you know, it's a good to get an idea from the client whether that is a hard and fast, or is that what is that the area that we want to stay in, and do we have some wiggle room? And then you can give them kind of options. Well, this is what we can do to be right here, and if you're okay to go a little bit higher, then this is what we can offer. So talking about it a little bit differently. Selecting a venue, determining a setup, all these things are really important. Securing services at that point in the planning process. Services like catering, audiovisual, speakers, performers, decorations, parking, transportation, and then arranging all of the parts of the event activities, and then determining the schedule or run of the event. That's really important. um, so that it runs smoothly and there aren't big breaks or gaps, and then dealing with contracts. And once you get all of that solidified, that's when you start with the marketing, to get your attendees to come, invitations, event packets, or swag. Then you get to the point of actually executing the event. Um, I think on here or on the slideshow, it says coordination. We call that event execution here. It's the same thing. It's really, what happens during the event. So you're directing the event, handling any issues as they arise, problem solving, critical thinking, just being present, kind of reminding people, making sure the right people go up on stage at the right time, that sort of a thing. In addition to that, managing staff, providing leadership, communicating and motivating, modeling fantastic service, delegating responsibility to empower them and develop their skills. So even in the process, so there's your multitasking. I'll get on board with your multitasking for event execution. So you definitely have a lot of coals in the fire that you're making sure are going well. And then also having contact and communication with all of your different service providers. So it's not just about your staff, it's also who you've hired. Having contact with those AV services providers, because if they're having an issue, they need to feel real comfortable coming to you quick, because that's a problem that has to be solved right away. You can't move forward without it. And maybe you can come up with some sort of a workaround, or okay, so that's not working. Well, let's try this, because you might have some experience, because this is what you do, that you've seen something else work. So having those relationships, not just with your own staff, but also with your service providers. And then it's the evaluation process. Now, continuous evaluation throughout the entire planning process is really important. Reflecting on what's going well, what's not working, what you can change all the way through the process is important. But I would say even after the event, really having like that meeting, the good, bad, the ugly, the feedback, what worked, what didn't work, from the clients, from the attendees, weigh your outcomes against your objectives. Did you accomplish what you set out to do? And if not, how do you fix that? Like, what do you do next time? How do you make that happen? In general, I know we're running out of time. um, in general, how far in advance do you think that you should start planning an event? What do you think is like an appropriate time to put together a new event?
I think it kind of like depends on the event itself. Because if it's like a major event, I feel like you need to have further time to plan it. Whereas if it's a bit smaller, it might not take as much time. So going on the basic route for like a wedding event with like 100 people, I would think like 6 months in advance to like a year. So
So I do think you're right to a certain extent, that the simplicity of an event, if you're talking about a meeting, something very simple, symposium, some of those things that can be pretty simple, I do think you could do those in a shorter amount of time. I really operated, when I was planning my own events, that it took a year. It took a year. But I was doing a majority of community events. So there was a huge marketing component. And I think that adds a lot. If you have a captive audience, I think that that's a little bit different, that you can do things a little bit shorter. But I mean, several of you said a year, 10 to 12 months. I agree completely. And one thing that will be really helpful, and I would imagine you're going to get this in your event planning class, is developing kind of a schedule that you use for events. This is what you do 12 months out, 10 months out, 9 months out, 6 months out, 5 months out, 3 weeks out, 2 weeks out, that you have that set up for every event. Because again, the whole hit by a bus thing, if someone has to pick up and run with it, they need to know what still needs to be done, because they might not have as much experience as you do. So having that kind of all laid out for your specific event is going to be super, super helpful. There is a little bit different role, I would say, depending on the type of the location, your role in the event. So specifically for us, the way our process works, as we receive requests for use of space, they have to be, the minimum is 15 days out, business days, for an event, but it could be much, much longer than that, for something very large, because things move more quickly here than they did when I was planning my own for a city. It's just kind of the difference of a college environment. But within a week of acceptance, we go through an event confirmation process, and that's where we talk that we talk to the person and make sure we have enough information to make sure we reserve enough space for them, and set an initial estimate so they kind of have an idea of what their event is going to cost them. About for large or complex events, about 3 months out, or for regular events, 4 weeks out at a minimum. This is when the real planning process begins, when we secure the services and update the estimates and schedule staff. We actually do all of that for them. I told you we are a full service facility. So all the services, I do that for them. So we've really tried to take a lot of that stress out of the process for them, because a lot of the people that do events with us, they are not event planners. So we really help them in that process, because if an event goes poorly, it really looks bad on the facility. It looks bad on the management. And so we want to help that process, because we don't want a group's lack of planning to reflect poorly on us, and we want those events to run smoothly. It's less stressful for us, and it's much better for the organization. So then we have the event execution, which is where we do all the things that we talked about. And then we have a post-event procedure where we do a meeting or a survey, wrap up, and then do notes for the next year, and discuss ways to improve. And then we bill. So that's kind of our process. I know we're about, what time is class over?
Let's do about 5 more minutes, and then I have a couple wrap up things.
Okay, that sounds good. So on in the slideshow, it talks a little bit about specifically about careers in events. And I mean, it talks all the ones we've talked about: meeting planners, event planners, wedding planners, exhibition managers, hotel, conference center, like the marketing side, their sales side that are, bringing people in, restaurant sales, hotels, convention centers. But in addition to that, there's a lot. I mean, large companies, they hire event planners. They have a lot of that in-house. They used to do a lot of it with contracted services, but they're recognizing that a lot of times it's cheaper for them to have in-house event planners, and also there's just a benefit to it. Some of the things, like, I'll just take a couple more minutes and kind of give you a little bit more specifically about what I've done. So I worked in nonprofits. I worked for the YMCA. Some of the things I did for them were an Easter egg hunt, a battle of the bands, lock-ins, that 3-on-3 basketball tournament that I told you about, and then like summer teen adventure camps, and parks and recreations, craft fair, a citywide garage sale, touch a truck, super fun event, mom and son camp out, dinner with Santa, lunch with the bunny, daddy-daughter dances, triathlons, pumpkin plunge, kid shows, kid water days, fireworks for the 4th of July, music festivals, polo games, and then also managed rentals for birthday parties and weddings and things like that. In addition to that, I was in charge of a renovation of an event facility. So the responsibilities, they can just be a huge gamut. Then specifically for the university, it falls a little bit more with facility management, but as on that full service capacity, we do a lot more of the event planning than some other facilities do, including event design, parking, AV, small and large scale production, catering, parking, and decor. If you didn't get a chance to see the event last night here, we're doing another one next month. If I could even, if you wanted to come and see it in person and see kind of what all goes into it, just reach out and let me know. It's kind of a really neat thing, and it'll give you an idea of kind of the scale. Like I said, we do from small scale up to large scale. So everything from, all the things we've discussed. We talked a little bit about that we have a staff, that I have a staff here. I also, we have internship opportunities and things like that too. So keep that in mind, because everything we do, we pay for. So sometimes it's hard to find those experiences that you can also make money, and that is a challenge because I know that a majority of you can't live on no job. So working a full-time job without getting paid for it, like a lot of internships end up being, can be a real challenge. But I think I can let you go from there. Thank you.
Tiffany, that was great. And I'm just going to second, as you guys are going forward, first of all, I'm kind of changing around the internship, so we'll see what happens with that. But the other thing is, here's my rule and philosophy when it comes to paying for internships. If you are working for a for-profit company, they should be paying you ethically. I know not everyone agrees with that. I know there are some students who have gotten great internships that were unpaid. They were really happy with them, and they were with for-profit companies, and they say, well, that's just the way things are. And I just morally can't agree with that. If you work for a not-for-profit company, then yes, by all means, the majority of people working there are not for profit. And if you want to get into that world, that's a very common thing to happen because it's a thing of passion. So in general, when you're going out and you're getting it, hotels and restaurants tend to never not pay because the federal guidelines state that if you are displacing a normal employee, that you cannot not pay them, that's illegal. Events tend to fall on this ground of, oh, well, we're taking you on our business meetings, therefore we don't have to pay you for setup because you went on a business meeting with me. I just don't really, I don't ethically agree with that. I make my position known. I have had a little bit of conversations with some of our people who offer internships, but I'm just gonna throw that out there so you guys can make your own decisions. I'm not the one to make a decision for you if you want to take an opportunity that's not paid. I personally don't agree with it, which is why I think it's great to do things like what Tiffany has on campus, where you get the wide gamut of events and all the really cool experiences, and you're paid while you're doing, which is what you should be. Now, just moving on to a couple of things, Tiffany, if you don't mind, just for a couple of minutes. Next week, your exam is on Tuesday. Remember, we don't come into class. You guys can take it during that 48-hour time span. 1 hour exam, take it once. Please don't use help from other people. You can use your own notes, that's fine. And then you'll notice on Thursday, we don't have a formal class session because I am giving you guys some time to work on your reflective essays, which are due in a couple weeks. But if you have not finished your networking assignment yet, this is the week to do it because it is due on April 6th. Just a few quick things. Let me do this really quickly about that reflective essay. If you go into the documents on D2L, you will find this one right here. Make sure I see all you guys so I can know if you have any questions. Oh, okay. All right, there we go. Now I can see you guys. You'll see this document here. It goes through exactly what a reflective essay is. Let me give you the short of it. Unlike a research paper, it is about you and your growth with the material that we've had in class. Things you've learned along the way, maybe your perceptions have changed. Ashley did a great job when she was reflecting on her networking assignment, and she can take that further here because she was talking specifically about maybe she didn't want to be a tour planner, but she wanted to be involved in tours in other ways. That's exactly what I'm looking for. That how has this opened your eyes? How has this changed your perceptions? Are you more interested? Are you less interested? Does this make you worried? Does this make you excited? Just any of those kinds of feelings. It still needs to be well thought out. It still needs to be well written and put into this kind of thematic essay format. Now, if you're looking at how I grade, this is how I'm going to grade. It's out of 50 points. And for each of these elements, if you go down just a little bit more, you'll see what exactly an A looks like based on these categories. Big one here, make sure you're following those directions. Standard formatting on your paper, 12-point font, 1-inch margins. Your document should automatically have 1-inch margins. You should not have to change them. Mostly what I get is sometimes people shorten their margins so they can get them more space. Please don't do that. 1.5 spacing and 4 to 5 pages long. So are there any brief questions about the reflective essay? I doubt any of you have started looking at it. I just wanted to put it on the radar, especially since next week you have some time to work on this. Pretty straightforward, right? Okay, any questions about the networking exam or the networking project that is due on April 6th, which is coming up? And I really appreciate, Ashley, you did a great job. I was able to upload that as an example so you guys can see that too. And then I just wanted to briefly mention it. I'm not going to talk about it now because you have a lot of things going on. There are going to be some major schedule changes after our next exam as far as what we're doing. And I have a little surprise for you guys I think you're going to be excited about, but I'm not going to tell you about that surprise. I'm going to tease you a little bit here to stay tuned and what I'll do is I'll put an announcement out after your exam on Tuesday, Wednesday, on Thursday, so you can read about it and then we'll talk about it in class the following Tuesday. But I think you guys will be happy with some of the changes I'm making for the last section of our class and the reasons why. So any other comments or things? Because I won't see you guys again until Tuesday, the April, let's see, what's the date? I won't see you to the day your networking assignment is due on April 6th. Of course, you can always reach out. Any questions, comments, things you wanted to talk about? All right, then without further ado, we are done for today. Good luck on your exam, and I hope you guys have a great weekend.